In this video, we're going to look at some logic, and specifically we're going to look at conditional statements and their converse. So what is a conditional statement? Really, conditional statements are just if-then statements. So if one thing is true, then this will result. So here's an example. If your mark is 86% or greater, so there's the if part. If your mark is 86% or greater, then you have an A. So that would be a conditional statement. And we might ask ourselves, is that true? If your mark is 86% or greater, then you have an A. And yes, that's certainly true. If your mark is 86% or greater, then you have an A, because anything greater than or equal to 86 is an A. We call these this part here, the if part, the hypothesis. And the hypothesis is basically just our assumption. After the then part is the conclusion. And the conclusion is our result. So this is a conditional statement, and it's a true statement. If the mark is greater than 86%, then you have an A. We can talk too about the converse. And the converse says, a converse is when the hypothesis, let's try that again, when the hypothesis and the conclusion in our conditional statement are switched. So we're going to switch these two around. So instead of if your mark is 86% or greater, then you have an A, now it'll becomes if you have an A, then you have a mark 86% or greater. And sometimes this changes the context entirely. But let's see. So now let's think about this. If you have an A, then is your mark 86% or greater? Yes, it definitely is. If you've got an A, then for sure your mark is going to be 86% or greater. Let's look at another conditional statement. So here's another example. Here's my conditional statement. If you are texting, then you are using a cell phone. Let's see, is that true? Yes, it is. If you're texting, at least at the time of this video, the only way I know of to text somebody is to use a cell phone. So the conditional statement is a true statement. But now let's consider the converse. So we're going to switch the hypothesis and the result around. And it says, if you are using a cell phone now, then you are texting. But that's not necessarily true, because there's lots of other things you can do with a cell phone. You could simply be calling somebody. You could be using your data. There's lots of things that we can do other than texting with a cell phone. So what I've done is I found a counterexample. And a counterexample is simply an example that disproves a statement. So in this converse, my counterexample was I could have been calling somebody on my cell phone, or I could have been using data. And we only need to find one counterexample to disprove this converse. So when we look at a conditional statement or we look at the converse, really what we're trying to do is consider if there is a counterexample. And if there's not, then the statement's true. If we can simply find one counterexample, then we've disproved that statement. So we've seen that some statements, such as this one that we did here, would work both ways. So the hypotenuse and the conclusion worked here, and they worked in terms of the converse. In this example, when they work both ways, we call this biconditional. The hypotenuse worked towards the conclusion, and when we switched them around, they worked as well. So it wasn't just a one-way conditional statement, but the converse also was true. So if that's the case, then we call that a biconditional statement, whereas this one, it worked this way, but when we came back, this one worked this way, but when we tried to do it this way, this did not work when we reversed them. So this is not a biconditional statement. So that's how we can look at conditional statements and their converse.